Today we have a wonderful session on the IP and like in terms of the perspective from the investors' point of view, why this is important and how IP auditing is being done and what kind of due diligence need to be filled over there. We have Ms. Pooja with us as well as a speaker, and Krishna will be the moderator for the session. Also, we have Mr. Patnaik with us, the CEO for AIC C.V. Raman with us. The program we are hosting it with them as part of the our movement to bring support to HNIs. So handing over to you, Krishna, on that point of note.
So, thanks, Mukesh, for that. So maybe I'll just start with a quick intro about Headstart. I'm sure a lot of people who are watching this video might be new to the community, right? Headstart is one of the largest early stage communities for startups in India. And we have created an impact for more than a decade. In fact, I would say more than 15 plus years being part of the startup ecosystem. Headstart has grown a lot. And in fact, when the first wave hit us, we completely pivoted everything towards doing online meetings, online workshops, boot camps, and all that. And here we are in the same trend, working on another month-long celebration of the startup ecosystem, which is by the startup ecosystem and for the startup ecosystem. And we call this Startup September, right? And today we have with us Pooja Bhatia, who is going to be part of this session. And we are in the first week of Startup September. And today's session is all about IP, due diligence for investors and EBC, and how we do it and why we need to look into such things, right? And before we jump into the session, I just wanted to add a bit about Headstart Investor Circle as well. Headstart Investor Circle is again a community of investors is what we focus on as part of the Headstart Investor Circle, right? We wanted to bring down a group of new angel investors and HNIs and also give them access to all the early stage founders. And our main focus is also to maximize the angel funds for all the tier 2 and tier 3 startups. And Headstart Investor Circle is proud to also be doing this for the ecosystem. And it's going to be a year since we started Headstart Investor Circle, and it's going well. We have done close about the 2 deals, and 4 to 5 deals are in their advanced stages. So without any further ado, we have Pooja Bhatia with us, who's the Chief Manager at Innovation Technology Transfer Office. And she is an experienced IP and licensing professional, and she has worked a lot with the life science domain. Pooja, I'll leave it to you to introduce yourself.
Thanks, Krishna, for the introduction. And, I would like to congratulate everyone, Gautam, Taha, Tushar, Vanya, Mukesh, and you and each and everyone in the Headstart team for, getting all the stakeholders of the ecosystem together for this month-long celebration. And, it's very interesting because there are so many sessions. I have also booked my slot for some of them. And I really found the Saturday games part quite interesting. So I look forward to more sessions. Setting the context for the discussion and introducing a bit about myself, I have been in this domain for the last 15 years. I started off as an IP trainee from the DST's Women's Scientist Scheme, where I was trained for IP and tech transfer for a year. It was a hands-on job training. And after that, I have not looked back. I'm a science student. I was, doing my PhD. I left that in between and started off with this. And since then, I have not looked back and not regretted my decision of leaving PhD. But yes, I have also on the way picked up different set of experiences from different organizations, have picked up different credentials. I'm a registered patent agent with the Indian Patent Office. I'm a registered tech transfer professional, a certified licensing professional. Both of these are internationally recognized credentials. And right now in India, I'm the only one who has all three together. And I hope there would be many more like me who would be having these credentials soon. So that is about me. Krishna, would you like to talk a bit more about?
Yeah, that's actually nice. Thanks, Pooja, for joining us. And as you rightly mentioned, right, Startup September brings together several people, right? Right from your founders to investors to venture capitalists to accelerators, incubators, and even the likes of all the state governments the central governments and accelerator together, and we have all individual tracks focused on all these broad partners that we have, and we have worked together for more than a decade. So it's going to be very interesting, the start of month, which is September. To quickly set the context for this particular session, like we mentioned, this session is all about IP, due diligence for investors and VC, right? When it comes to IP, especially when we talk about patent, it becomes like a huge parameter to measure someone's innovation, right? Either it be the creator or either it be the founder of someone, right? And also there are some stats saying that India is ranked 10th globally in the number of patents that is being filed and 8th in trademarks. And of course, compared to China, which leads the table, and US being in the second place, China earlier in 2019 itself, they have filed more than double the number of what US would have. And India is slowly growing up the ladder. And this has become like an important subject to even consider. And more than anything, people also say this IP has a distinct economic advantage as well for every country whenever the number of IPs goes up. So you being an expert of IP and handling the work more than a decade, how would you see this from an enabler point of view, Pooja?
Sure. Krishna, before answering your question, I would like to, highlight the misconception most people have about IP and IPR. So there's a difference between IP and IPR. IP is when you don't have any protected or registered form of IP. So it can be inventions, know-how, logos, jingles. But when you protect all of these, they become IPR, which is intellectual property rights, and these are enforceable. But then again, these are only enforceable in the country where it is granted. So if you file something in India, you can't go and enforce it in US or in China. And then again, if we look at IPR, it's not just one thing. Most people think, I have even heard phrases like, can we patent our logo? So people fail to understand that, each form of IPR has its own characteristic. It has its own scope of protection. They have a different term of protection. If we compare the four main forms of IPR, these are patents, copyright, trademarks, and designs, and each one of them vary with respect to what they are protecting. If, for example, the patents would only be protecting the technology part, be it a process or a product. A trademark would be protecting logo, jingle, phrases. Even the Headstart logo is registered as a trademark. They have an R, so it's a registered trademark. If you look at, the way we both are exchanging the question and answer round, it is a form of expression and that is copyrighted. And the last but not the least is design, which is for look and feel. So, each of these are different. And you just don't need to file patents. You can go in for other forms of IP as well. Create a portfolio for yourself. Now, coming back to your question, that China is leading while, we are still edging towards becoming number one. We are improving in terms of number. But even if China is on the top, no one has done an assessment to see if their patents is actually worth it, or is it something called as just junk patents that they're filing. Nobody is doing that assessment. Nobody is checking if it is just the filing numbers which they're quoting, or is it the number of grant. So if you compare the ratio between both, I believe there would be a huge difference between the number of applications being filed and granted. But here right now in India, the ecosystem is right. There are a lot of steps being taken to increase the awareness so that, even startups, individual innovators can file their respective IPs. If you look at, there are so many schemes for startup, right? You have a startup scheme to enable them, which is bringing down the entire cost. The professional cost is taken care by the government completely. The official fees is the only part which they have to take care, and that is even low. And now recently, they have also declared a similar pattern for the academic institutions. So all these steps are taken by the government of India to ensure the numbers go high. They are also, through their various agencies and both private partners, are going ahead and increasing the level of awareness on what IP is, how it is essential, and why it needs to be protected. So that kind of, answer your questions that yes, we are moving forward and definitely the numbers will go high.
Definitely, definitely. Thanks for that. And also thanks for the basic, helping us understand the basic difference between IP and what is IPR. And that's also very essential for people to understand. And moving on to one of the basic questions and on the very similar lines of what we were discussing right now, right? This IP is one subject that's been heavily talked about when it comes to investment, right? People look at the startups if they have interesting IPs and where do they have their IPs filed. And sometimes these IPs also add a huge value to the valuation that the company might get, right? And also sorry, Pooja.
No, I just said yes.
Yeah,
I was just
yeah.
agreeing to your statement.
Yeah. And also back then in our schools and colleges, we have studied about this IP and what sort of importance and what sort of value does this IP hold. It was a very big learning for us, and we get asked questions about this a lot. And basically, in the startup ecosystem, we've heard a lot about due diligence process pertaining to financial due diligence or legal due diligence. Or you know what about the valuation and everything. There's also something called the IP auditing that these people talk about. What is that all about, and why is it even needed in first place, Pooja?
So, Krishna, IP auditing or IP due diligence, as it is called, is more to know that, what all IPs does the organization, in this case, startup, has. Secondly, or what do they plan to have? Now, why is it essential? It is essential because, when you are investing into a company or you're deciding to invest into it, um, in most of the places, the VCs and investors are also lending their brand to the company. You would not like to get into something which is risky in terms of IP. What if the IP which they already have or the patents which they already have are infringing on somebody else? Or even if they don't have a patent, if they're working on a technology which is already protected by someone else and they are not aware of it. So that might create a huge issue later on. So why get into it? Does the company have the necessary freedom to operate, which means, is it risk free? Do they have the backward and the forward patterns or the rights to use that? So it could be they have a technology which is fitting into one part of the process, but there are patterns on both the other sides. So even if you have something in the middle, you can still not move forward, because you will have to use the backward IP and as well as the forward IP. So that is something which they have to look into. And the quality, as I mentioned, even the numbers do matter, where all they have filed, what are the geographies where they have filed, but the quality of the IP also matters, because if they are just filing the IP for the heck of it, it doesn't make sense. It won't give any protection to the company. So it is really of no worth or no value, neither to the investors or to the company. So before any VC or investor invests any money into a company, it would be very essential for them to look at what exactly is the form of IP they have, where all they have protected it, and what is it worth it.
Definitely, definitely. That's definitely worth checking, and for sure, people need to be educated on these things a lot. On the same lines, all these things could be very common. This IP filing or in what sector to be filed, and everything could be very common for all the tech enablers and everyone. But how does an investor get proper education about this, or how does this due diligence happen when they come to people or firms like ITTO? Right? What are some aspects of it, Pooja?
So Krishna, what we usually do is that we first try to explain the entire process to the VCs and investors, that what is it and what exactly we are going to look at, because it's easy. IP due diligence could be a large complicated process, or you can have a simple process where just you are looking at one particular aspect. But then, because they are investing, we usually look at four aspects of the entire IP portfolio which the uh, company has, which is checking the legal aspects in terms of what were the dates of filing, are they granted, are they not granted, which stage it is in the life cycle of the patent filing or the any other form of IP filing. and have they submitted the relevant documents? Do they have the ownership to what they have filed? What is the strength? Because that is the key. Unless and until you have the strength, if your patent is not strong enough, I am continuously referring to patent because that is one of the main forms which most of the startups go in for. So the strength is very crucial because that is what is going to determine what you can enforce against any of the infringers, and what is worth, that is going to give you a value, the entire company, the value uh, is what is dependent upon the strength of the IP. Then you also have to look at the technical scope. Uh, is it actually feasible? What they are doing, is it something which is, um, uh, out of the box, or maybe not even feasible in terms of technology? So all those kind of things have to be checked. And then last not the least, the freedom to operate, to ensure that none of the IPs are getting infringed by them, nor there are any backward or forward IP which would be influencing the entire process. There is another aspect, especially in life sciences, which is very critical, is the regulatory feasibility. Like, do they need any other regulatory approvals? So we kind of also do an assessment with respect to that. So there are 4 things that we critically see. One is the legal status of the IPR that has been filed, strength, technical aspect, and the freedom to operate.
Sure, 4 sharp points. But don't you think the organization which gives out the patent or the IP rights, wouldn't they check for saying, is there anything similar that exists, or do they also miss out on certain things which we should look out for?
Sometimes what happens is that the innovators may not be that savvy with the searching part. They may miss out on something. So checking the novelty from that respect is essential. I will give you an example. We were conducting a workshop for the students, and we taught them that they can use different tools to do the search. Now, we didn't touch upon the non-patent literature search because we thought that it is common for them to do it. So we just taught them how to do the patent search using the different patent databases. And there was one question from them. So once there is no patent that I found on any of the database, it means my invention is clear, which is not true. You have to look at the entire portfolio, right? You just can't look at the patents. You also have to look at the non-patent literature. You also have to look at the market information which is there. So, so sometimes, yes, they are not aware, or they, most of these startups, they try to save money and they try to do things on their own. So in the process of doing so, they they may not be aware of the entire formalities that are required with the respective offices, and they may have missed out on something which is eventually going to affect the grant of the patent or the IP. So that is why our roles comes into the picture, where we are aware about the laws, what are the procedures, and what are the necessary steps to be done. So that is how we are in a position to help them.
Understood. Understood. Just a follow-up question on these things, right? The due diligence, when it happens for financial or legal, it has some sort of a cycle, and it keeps happening once in a quarter, or like yearly twice, or something of those sorts, and they agree to it, right? When someone claims that they have an IP and this due diligence needs to happen, is there anything like that very similar to financial due diligence or something, or is this a one-time process?
No, it's not a one-time process. It's a continuous process. You have to audit your IP portfolio continuously. Even if there is no investment, we still suggest and still advise the startups to continuously audit their portfolio, because it's essential for them to know what stage it is. Is there anything that, there could be something which they had filed earlier and they are now not interested. So now what to do about that IP? Keep on investing money in it, or you could maybe look out for other companies to license it out. So all those strategies are possible only when it is continuously evaluated. Second, when you are doing a novelty or an IP assessment, what happens is sometimes some of the documents do not pop up at that time because of the either they are not published, or there could be something which is critical and it came up at a later stage and you have missed it when you did the assessment. So you still have to continuously monitor it. The other advantage of monitoring is to ensure that, if there is anybody else filing in the same space or using the same kind of technology, you can only catch them if you are continuously monitoring. You can't go and sue some
Understood.
infringer unless you are monitoring them.
It will be done without any notice, and we'll
Yes.
have to play the victim card then.
Yeah.
Understood. Understood. And I'd like to pick one interesting question on the technology transfer. One of our attendees have asked the question, right? It's from Ravi Kumar Tiwari. How does the whole process of technology transfer take place? How does one evaluate whether to take one-time license fees or royalties, and what goes into negotiation?
So the technology transfer process is actually divided into two. There could be out licensing where you are licensing it out, or it could be in licensing where you are licensing a technology. So now, if you are out licensing, the process would be different because you are on the different side of the table. You are giving out your technology. And while you are in licensing, you are kind of in a position to say no to a technology. So you have to assess the technology that you are taking in, what kind of IP portfolio it has associated with it. Does it have adequate protection? What stage it is? There are numerous factors that would determine the financial terms and conditions, and you can definitely negotiate on it once you have done the assessment. Now, when you are licensing, there's a different kind of assessment associated with it. It is technology assessment. It has more of a commercial potential assessment as well, because if you are taking an in license from an academic institution, they would generally be at a lower TRL level. So you need to invest more to make it market ready. So the entire process of technology transfer uh, is time consuming, will take you bit of a time to negotiate and come down to the right values for negotiating with the other party.
Understood. Understood. I'm sure, Ravi Kumar, you must have made notes, but you can also get in touch with Pooja. She's also part of Headstart Booster community. ITTO is also a part of it, and you can get access to her. We will circulate links on the chat. If someone, Mukesh or someone, if you can put up the link to the Headstart Booster community, that will be great on the chat. Thanks for that, Pooja. Moving on. Again, quick questions. What should VC and investors know about when it comes to IP, right? Or patents and rights that the startup own and what they can bring? What should they be aware of?
Krishna, I think in this case, the essential part, especially with the academic innovators and startups or, entrepreneurs, they should ensure that they have the right to actually work on the technology. What happens is most of the times the students think that once they are an inventor onto an application, they have a right to go and use it. But that is not true unless and until you have proper due authorization from the applicant. So there's a huge difference between an applicant and an inventor. The applicant is the one who has the sole and complete right over the IPR. So once you have a proper due authorization from the applicant, then only you can pursue that particular IPR. Having said that, uh, it is not just a simple email approval that you need. You need to have proper documentation in place. Um, if you are taking a license, then you should have a license agreement which states clearly that the startup has the right to use it. The other thing that we have commonly seen is that most of these startups, with the startups, is that the founders or the entrepreneurs, they usually file the applications in their own name. I don't know the reason why do they do that, but this is the trend that they follow. And then they allow the startup to use it without transferring the rights to them or licensing the rights to them. In that case, even though the founder is part of the startup, both the founder and the startup are separate entities. Like a founder is an individual, a startup is an organization. Even though the founder is part of the startup still doesn't have the complete rights on the IP to start using it. In fact, if they're doing it in a way, they are infringing onto the founder's IP. So the VCs have to be careful in all these situations. They also need to know that, the IP laws are territorial in nature. So whatever the startups are claiming, if they have filed it in one particular country, they don't need to check what are the particular laws in that country. There could be some exceptions. Most of the patent laws across globe, they have exceptions where they don't allow certain inventions to be patented. So that is something that they need to be sure, that even if the startup is claiming, are they actually going to get the patent on it or not? Then, like, since it is territorial, obviously the IP would, the IPR would only be enforceable in that particular country. You, even if you have something in India, you can't enforce it in US or China. So these are some of the things which are crucial. And then there are three important criteria with respect to the patent, where it talks about novelty, inventive step, and industrial application. In case of each country, like if you talk about India, if you have disclosed, you can file a patent application within 12 months, but that is not true for other countries. In US, even if you have published or you have disclosed, the time the time period between which you can file an application varies. Same is for Japan. So one needs to know about such, minor information to be sure that whatever the startup is claiming is actually right.
Sure. Definitely, definitely. And whatever that you said right now should also be considered as one of the alerts or some sort of a red thing for people in the investing space to look out for, right? Is there anything else that the VC should be aware of where they should be of high alert?
Yes, I think there should be an alert if they know that the startup doesn't, have a budget for the IP part. Most of the startups forget that, they have been budgeting for the entire technology or the product part. They forget about the IP aspect. IP is not inexpensive, right? You have to pay for it,
Yeah.
not just for filing, but for maintaining as well. The
Hmm.
cost in India may be low, but abroad it is expensive. And definitely, you would not just be catering to India, you would like to protect your invention or your technology in other countries. So you need to have money for it. So there has to be a budget. Then second is that, like I said, most of the founders like to do it on their own. They would not like to work with a professional where they feel, maybe the professional is not advising them correct, or if the professional doesn't agree with their way of strategy, there's a conflict. So the founders feel they can do it on their own. They don't need a professional. But in a way, the founders can be expert in their technology, but they can't be expert in everything. So uh, when you are taking the help of a CA, a legal person to draft the agreements and everything, then why for IP do you want to do it on yourself and kind of put your IP at risk? So these are main points that the VCs should know, that if a startup is doing, they have to be careful. These should be the alert or trigger points. Okay, this is a startup, we'll have to kind of mentor and put our rules to them that this is what they have to do.
Understood. And should investors go ahead, let's say a startup that they have identified has some technology or some sort of a process that is worth patenting or filing for IP, and they have not done it, should they go ahead with such investment?
Only after they have done the complete due diligence, because even if they're working on a technology which is worth filing, uh, they should do their own independent assessment of it, rather than just relying on what the company's patent attorney has mentioned or given a search on. Second is that again, it is not just the worth of the technology. They also have to look at the infringement part. If it is getting impacted by any of the already existing IPs which are there, which are filed already, so they have to check for that as well.
Understood. Understood. Is there any common websites or such sort of things that people can look at, just like how we do normal Google search, or is there any forum where they can go and even get to know about a lot of interesting patents that comes out of the market, right? Is there any interesting Substack or any newsletters on it for people to get educated or how to go about filing?
Krishna, right now, no, there is no one comprehensive site where you can go and look for it. there are different various sites, like each of the patent offices usually have that option of, searching, but then you should be quite comfortable with using their databases. There are paid databases, but these quite on an expensive side. There is one tool which is there for patent search, but it doesn't have Indian coverage. It doesn't cover the
Okay.
Indian patent office. So, so whatever information you have, you have to kind of look at 3-4 different sites to come up with a complete picture.
Understood. Understood. Sure. And we have almost hit the time. Any quick suggestions from your side to the VCs and people who are in the sector?
So I would only ask them to, while they are assessing the startup, monitoring the startup, they should also keep an eye on the IP aspect throughout their life cycle, just to ensure that they are risk-free. Also have them on board to use, set certain rules for them, like they have to involve professionals for the IP part. They should have a policy in framework in place to ensure that the ownership of IP doesn't go out to other people. Now, most of the startups, what happens is they sign agreements, or they would give out some work, outsource it out without, signing proper agreements. So what happens is they would also end up making them an inventor or applicant on one of the IPs. So that way they are losing on to the ownership. So all these frameworks should be in place, and the VCs should insist right from the beginning that the companies have all these framework with them. The last point that I would like to tell them is that, if any of the startups has any registered IP, they should follow the normal, the standard norms, like Headstart has R on the trademark. So they should put it, use it appropriately and not just put R wherever they feel like. So that's the only suggestion from my side for the VCs, and some alert points that we have already discussed. Thanks, Krishna.
Thanks a lot, Pooja. Thanks for joining us early in the morning. Really, thanks a lot for that. I would like to invite Sir Raman on stage right now to express the vote of thanks. By the way, Gautam, Gautam, you're also on the call. Would you like to hear something from Pooja that we have already not asked her about? Is there anything else?
Thanks, Krishna. So a very good evening to everyone. This is Gautam here from Headstart. I just wanted to, quickly thank Pooja for, spending time with us. I know, you're doing this while being in the US, and it's early mornings for you. So thank you so much for doing this. I would love to also request Mr. Patnaik to join us, because he's one, of course, CEO of one of the Headstart hubs in Odisha. Also, second, he's been a driving force behind wanting to, bring in a lot of learning for a lot of aspiring angel investors, especially HNIs, and a lot of aspiring angel investors who've been wanting to invest. He's been driving the charge to see how can we put together learning programs. So I would definitely love to have him share a couple of quick thoughts on why is he doing this? What is his motivation? Or, of course, he's been, an active part of the community. But, if he can share his 2 thoughts on why it's important in terms of the learning sessions for aspiring entrepreneurs, and of course, his thoughts in today's session as well.
Yeah, hi everyone, and thank you, Gautam and Headstart, for having this program floated for the guys who are aspired to, put their fund into startups and know how the startup investment works. And thanks, Pooja, for bringing in the nooks of investment and having the legal life cycle of the product and the company how to be maintained, and the proper stakeholding for the legal life cycle from the investors front. Yeah, that was very informative, and wake up call for these investors, and the new aspired investors definitely must look at all these nitty-gritties of investment. And as Gautam asked, this has been very important for a new ecosystem to come up with all stakeholders growing, being homegrown and contributing, converting the nascent ecosystem into a very solid, rugged, and having all the verticals grown out of the ecosystem itself. So there, you guys are helping a lot for the new ecosystem to come up with the right content and constituents to be very neatly learned and also, grow organically inside the ecosystem to build it. That was beautiful from, 1st of September. It's going all good. Yeah, thank you for switching on my video. Yeah, so that was quite inspiring, to work on all the stakeholders, not just taking yourself into, the very restricted incubation part of the process. We also need to be, like as you said, trademark, patent, all this about A's after the idea comes into somebody's mind. So this has to be, as we grow as a baby, like the day shows, the morning shows the day. You got to grow the baby properly. Similarly, the idea got to be, nurtured properly in an incubator. So the incubator must have an insight of where to preserve which kind of, legal protections and all that. So where to preserve and conceptuality, where to have a trademark, where to have, proper NDAs got to be done, because all the dealings with all, horizontal and vertical partnerships happen in the incubator itself. So the incubator must be very intelligent enough to guide the startups where to do all kind of legal documentation to preserve their rights and make a right, good valuation in the future, and make benefits to the investor and simultaneously for the startup itself. So that's it. That's what I expressed Gautam, and Gautam helped me out to reach out to the angels locally and also nationally. We at C.V. Raman AIC, we got 2 incubators also. We have a TBI from NITI. Having 2 incubators and a national ecosystem, we feel responsible then, kind of having this grants from Government of India. So that's it, which led us to, think of all these sites of incubation and acceleration and, funding, all that. So we are trying to maximize the, options for the startups in this national ecosystem. That's it. Thank you so much. Thank you, everybody, to be a part of this and making it informative. Thanks. Thanks a lot. And officially, I also give the vote of thanks for this event to Krishna, who is joining as a volunteer for Headstart. I really appreciate all the Headstart volunteers being so motivated, just to bring in the things for the people here. And people like you, the knowledge stakeholders, kind of sticking it out for everybody, for half an hour, 1 hour, a lot of good information staying, giving it to people. Thanks a lot. Thank you so much. Have a great day ahead.
Thank you, Patnaik. Thanks a lot for joining us.
Thank you so much.
Yeah. Thanks a lot, Pooja. Just that there's one last question if you have time. Is that okay?
Yeah, definitely, please.
Sure. So I don't know the name of the guy. He has posted saying, I had filed a patent in 2013. I did PCT and got the patent from US in 2018. It's 2021 and still no word from Indian Patent Office. Is there any way that people can expedite this process? Any hacks?
Nowadays, the Patent Office has kind of, reduced the time period which they used to take. So maybe you can get in touch with us. We'll have to see if you have filed the request for examination or not, and then help you see how we can help you with the entire process.
Superb. All the attendees, access to Pooja's profile is also on the chat, and also access to ITTO services is also on the chat. You can go and check out Headstart Boosters page, and you can definitely get access to it. Thanks a lot. Thanks a lot, Pooja, for spending your early morning with us.
Thank you so much,
and
Krishna.
Thanks everyone who joined the session.
It was a pleasure talking to you and talking with everyone, sharing my thoughts, and I hope everybody found it useful. Thank you so much for having me here.
Definitely. Thank you. Thanks a lot.